Not even Texas Roadhouse can escape winter's chilly grasp. And why on earth is KFC moving to Texas? Hello, this is Jonathan Mays, editor-in-chief of Restaurant Business, and welcome to The Week in Restaurants, our discussion of the week's top stories in the restaurant industry. This week, I am here with Restaurant Business Senior Technology Editor Joe Guskowski. Later on, Joe will give his views on Uber Eats and DoorDash, and we will also preview the upcoming Restaurant Leadership Conference with our Director of Events Content, Emily Nordee-Rogers. But first, let's talk Texas Roadhouse. Joseph, I'm a little surprised. I know that, winter happens to everybody and everybody has a down cycle, yada, 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 yada. But Texas Roadhouse showing a little bit of weakness is a complete shock to me.
It is. It should be. I mean, since the pandemic, Texas Roadhouse has been pretty much immune to any of the other sort of trends happening in the restaurant industry. Inflation didn't seem to bother them at all. They've been building traffic quarter after quarter, year after year, despite all the other issues restaurants have been dealing with, until the beginning of 2025, which has been tough on the restaurant industry. We've heard, there's been bad weather across the country. There's been wildfires. Inflation has been going up again, and consumers seem to be feeling it. And that has finally hit Texas Roadhouse. They reported through the first 7 weeks of this quarter, same-store sales growth of 2.9%, which is not bad at all, but relative to what they've been doing, it's surprising to see. So they are mortal, and they are feeling the effects that other restaurants are feeling. That hasn't shaken their confidence at all. And they view it as, external things out of their control that should pass. Right.
That's probably the right attitude, which I'll talk about in a second. But I mean, their same-store sales, they're probably the most consistent restaurant, just right now, just period, the most consistent restaurant chain. So they was 7.7% last quarter. Mm-hmm. The last, just going to rattle off their last few quarters: 8.5, 9.3, 8.4, 9.9, 8.2, 9.1, 12.9, 7.3, 8.2, 7.6, 16, and then we start getting into some post-pandemic nonsense numbers.
Nothing below 7 since 2020. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's unbelievable.
That's 7.3, which was the second quarter of 2022. So, I mean, the 7.7 that they just did was the worst since then. I mean, mm-hmm. think about that. You do 7.7 and that was the worst
slowing down
in 2 years, which is ridiculous. And now they're doing, so they're doing 2.9, which, and again, that's the surprise to your point is, there were weather events, during certain quarters and things of that nature. But to see Texas Roadhouse report that is just sort of like, I don't know, finding out Santa Claus is a jerk or something like that. It's just something you're not really prepared for, and it shows you pretty much how bad this winter has been. And there are some side challenges. I mean, it's very common right now for restaurants to be underperforming, and that's been probably the bigger shock of early 2025, as we see some pretty broad commentary on underperformance. It's not really, for a lot of sectors, certainly the ones that I cover, the fast food industry, there's a lot of underperformance, a lot of it, and a lot of it has been blamed on lower income consumers. Now, did they talk about lower income consumers at all, or the industry issues?
No, I mean, they mentioned, they've heard the same thing from other chains, but they didn't seem to think that, it's a consumer spending issue so much as consumers couldn't get to its restaurants because of cold weather, snow, illness, and some calendar shifts, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So, I don't think they're as concerned about that as others.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a good thing. I mean, look, I think that their attitude on this is the right one. I mean, the worst thing I think a brand can do in a scenario like this is to overreact to anything like that. And you should never overreact to early year sales. Never. Nobody should be, everybody, anybody seeing, what these early sales are like should be, even if they do see a low income consumer problem, which is probably the case throughout much of the fast food sector, nobody should be altering their plans. I mean, if it persists quarter after quarter after quarter, and then you start seeing some other evidence that maybe there's something that you're doing that's going on, or there is something going on that the consumer is just responding to broadly, then maybe you make some changes in what you're doing. But nobody should ever freak out, especially the first 3 quarters of the year. It's always noisy. It's always noisy because of weather is always a problem for restaurant companies. So I think that's probably the right thing. And it probably explains why they've been successful as long as that they have.
Yeah. It'll probably end up, a lot of restaurants will kind of just throw this quarter out. But the reason it's sort of frustrating, I guess, is because I think a lot of restaurants came into this year feeling optimistic and their dreams were so quickly shattered, Mm-hmm. So it's like, we got to wait a whole nother quarter now to really see what we're actually going to be doing this year,
Right. Yeah. It's a bit, the commentary to me on the low income consumer is probably where that disappointment lies. Weather happens every year, and anybody in the industry who's been around, longer than 2 years knows that weather influences events, and you just can't take it that seriously. Mm-hmm. The fact that, there was a lot of optimism at the end of last year that this would be fixed, and we're not, and to see lower income consumers having issues like this is problematic. I need to talk about KFC now. So that was absolutely one of the biggest bombs in a while, was the news that Yum Brands sent out saying that they're moving KFC headquarters to Texas. And Joe, I'm firmly on the I don't understand this one. I love Louisville, for the record. I do. I think it's a great city. But I would understand why you would move your headquarters from Louisville to Dallas. The reality is that the airport in Louisville, you can't really get anywhere. I mean, you would have to drive essentially to Cincinnati to get far. So, and that's important, especially if you're a global restaurant chain. So, the one that surprises me, like, I don't quite understand why you don't move Yum Brands headquarters in that scenario. So because a lot of Yum Brands executives already live in Dallas. So I'm at a loss why you would say you would move KFC without Yum Brands. And the only thing I can think of is that eventually that Yum Brands move is coming. And maybe I'm wrong. So I don't have any evidence. So this is just purely my conjecture. I have talked to a few people about this. KFC is really associated with Louisville, and why, and with Kentucky in particular, more so than other restaurant chains that with names. In fact, it's actually rare, Joe. It's rare to have a restaurant brand with some state or location in their name to be actually headquartered in those locations. Headquarters move all the time. What do you think about this?
So I'm gonna take the opposite stance. I think this was a smart long-term move. Once the initial shock wears off of KFC no longer being located in KFC, which no one will care about in a year, this makes sense for Yum, and here's why. Yum is a very kind of high-tech company. They're investing a lot in their tech. They just launched this tech platform called Byte that all of its brands can use. And I think that they want to start thinking of these individual brands as more of a singular whole, a platform in themselves. So having them all in the same place in a central location like Dallas, is that where it is? Dallas, Plano, that area?
Plano, suburb of Dallas. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, makes sense. I think, eventually they'll probably all be there. I think you're right that Yum corporate will be there eventually. And they start thinking of these brands as a whole, using the data they're collecting to make each of those brands better. It makes sense to have them all in the same place. On another note, I know KFC isn't doing very well. This may be a move to make that brand operate more efficiently, putting it next to some of the other Yum brands operations.
Sure.
What they should do is they build a nice big flagship KFC in Louisville, so it still has a footprint there. It's not like there's not going to be any KFC in Kentucky anymore. No one really cares about the headquarters. It's not like consumers are walking in there. No.
I mean, look, as I said, it is rare. I mean, Texas Roadhouse is based in Louisville. So they're trading, but no, I mean,
figure.
So Texas Roadhouse is in Louisville. Popeye's Louisiana Kitchen is in Miami, and before that it was in Atlanta. It hasn't been in Louisiana for decades. So it's in reality, it's rare. My argument though, if I would agree with you on the tech front, if they were moving that to Dallas but they're moving KFC to Dallas. As I said, if you moved Yum Brands headquarters to Dallas, that would make all the sense in the world, and I would fully understand it because of the flight issue, all some of these other issues, and that's why I do eventually think that move has to come. It really doesn't make sense. The question to me ultimately is whether they house all of them in one big facility, which would make the most sense, frankly. Rather than having these multiple. They have facilities in Kentucky and in Texas and in California. And, in theory, you can put them all in one place, similar to what Inspire Brands does. You can house them in sort of one location and it might make sense. And then you're going to get some savings and some efficiencies there, and then you'd have the access to the better airport and stuff of that nature. So I would agree with you. I mean, what you're doing is you're taking a Kentucky brand out of Kentucky, and that's the move you're making.
Which is just not something you do unless you have a very good plan, reason to do it.
Mm-hmm. I would hope so, but why do it this now and not? And maybe it's a rip the Band-Aid off approach. They're doing it piecemeal, or something along those lines. So this one was a stunner. I'm still, again, unless there's that long term, but we don't know what that is yet. And until then, we this is what they're keeping. This is what we go with, is that they're moving to KFC first. But this was the talk of the week in the restaurant circles. Everybody was talking about this, man. Everybody was talking about it, because name another chain that is as well associated with their home state. I could probably think of a couple, and actually Culver's. They don't have their names.
Culver's.
Are you from Wisconsin or something? Yeah. I mean, Culver's. I mean, I would sort of liken it to that you move Culver's out of Wisconsin, or, Dunkin', Massachusetts. KFC's had issues for a while. So, it's not like everybody in Kentucky is a KFC head or anything like that. But the Colonel Sanders was associated with Kentucky for sure. And he was the driving force of the brand. In fact, the last time the brand did really well, they were using Colonel Sanders in their advertisements. So that's where it's the KFC portion of this. If they decided to house everything in Dallas and stuff like that, then I'd understand. And that's why I think that's the only thing that makes sense to me. So, but what do I know? I'm just a guy talking on a microphone in my office.
You know a lot.
Yeah. Sure. All right. Awesome. Thank you very much, Joe. Coming up, we will have Joe Guskowski with Tech Check talking about DoorDash and Uber Eats. And then we will have Emily Nordee-Rogers, who is going to give us a sneak peek at who is speaking this year at the Restaurant Leadership Conference. But first, a word from whoever is sponsoring this week's podcast.
Keep up with what's happening in the restaurant industry with Restaurant Daily.
I'm NRN Managing Editor Leanne Zinsmeister.
I'm RB Managing Editor Heather Lally.
We bring you a specific look of what's happening in the restaurant world from brands like McDonald's, single unit mom and pop shops, and hot button issues like inflation, tariffs, and more.
Start your day right with the Restaurant Daily podcast every weekday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode.
Hey everyone, welcome to Tech Check with Joe Guskowski, where I, Joe Guskowski, talk really fast about one big story in restaurant tech. This week, it's a clash of the delivery apps, Uber versus DoorDash. Uber is suing DoorDash for alleged anti-competitive business practices. According to Uber, DoorDash has been coercing big restaurant chains into signing up for its white label delivery service, rather than use a similar service from Uber. DoorDash says the case has no merit and that its product is simply better than Uber's. Now, we knew these two companies weren't exactly friends. They're the two biggest delivery providers in the US. DoorDash is number one and Uber Eats is number two. But I don't know that anyone expected the rivalry to become so public. Legal argument aside, Uber has reason to be frustrated. DoorDash has been dominating the market for white label delivery. It has contracts with more than 90% of the largest chains in the US. As for where restaurants stand in all of this, several I've spoken to view it as a case of the pot calling the kettle black. They say both companies put pressure on restaurants to sign exclusive deals. But whether DoorDash has actually crossed a line with its tactics remains to be seen.
Okay, now that I have changed my shirt, I am here with Emily Nordee-Rogers. Emily, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
All right, what is happening at Restaurant Leadership Conference this year? Give us a preview, please.
What isn't happening at Restaurant Leadership Conference this year is what we should be asking. It's going to be power-packed. It's going to be fun. We have so many cool things happening, from the speaker lineup to all of our sessions to everything else happening on site. It's one you won't want to miss. That's all I can say. Mark Wahlberg, that's just amazing in itself. We have an Olympian, Gabby Thomas. We have a futurist coming. So we have something big happening each day alongside everything else that we always have at RLC that brings all of the industry leaders to the table.
Will Mark be wearing a shirt?
Wow. Most likely, unfortunately, all of our fans out there, yes, we won't get the ad preview.
All right. No, we get a couple of...
We're keeping it professional.
That's good. That's good. This is a professional conference. But I had to ask because he has a track record.
Yeah, that's true.
Now we give out a couple of awards, I hear.
So there are two prestigious awards happening. One that's going to be happening on Sunday. So anyone coming to RLC, make sure to get there Sunday evening. That's our Pacesetter Award. And this year we're honoring Dave's Hot Chicken and their leadership team. So it's going to be a pretty incredible night. You won't want to miss it. And then the other one, which is a staple at RLC, which is our Restaurant Leader of the Year. And we are just thrilled about the Restaurant Leader of the Year this year. It is Kevin Hutchman from the Brinker International team and what he's done with Chili's over the last few years, which I think, Jonathan, you can say a few words on that, of why he is the prime pick for this year.
Kevin Hochman was the job that he did at Chili's last year was actually amazing. We've never talked about this. I think the last time we talked about Chili's this much and it was as mired as it is today, we were all in the mall with big hairdos and stuff. Like it hasn't done that ever. And I have data going back to the mid 2000s and they've never even come close to 15% outside of the post pandemic, surge in business. But, so they really deserved, frankly, Kevin really deserved Restaurant Leader of the Year. No question about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's done some pretty incredible things, and his team itself is amazing, to say the least. So we're really excited for that one. That's taking place on Tuesday morning. So like I said, we have an action-packed lineup over the 4 days. And honestly, one thing is topping the other. So it's been a fun, very exciting agenda to plan this year and work with all the speakers that are going to be taking place. One that I would love to chat about is one of our intro kickoff sessions to the general session on Monday, which is our CEO versus CEO. No, they're not getting in a boxing ring. No, they're not going to fight. This is a conversation that's going to be had over a similar topic. And Christine Barone, CEO of Dutch Bros, is going to be part of that one, as well as Rob Lynch, who is the CEO of Shake Shack. So I think that one itself is going to be really exciting, just to see what unfolds and how they communicate with each other, because there's no moderator involved. It's just them, only them on stage. So
they usually ask pretty good questions of one another, actually.
They do. It was a fun one. We had it last year, and it was just, it really kind of set the tone of what's happening, not only in the industry, but with these leaders and how they're approaching, challenges to, everything that's going on in their world. So exciting stuff. Also Monday, before general session kicks off, one of the things that is really exciting that we implemented last year is our editorial lunch and learns. And Jonathan, you're going to be part of that, aren't you?
I at least in theory. Yeah. Yeah. That's
so one thing I do want to point out to anyone that's attending RLC, we only have 3 that are happening. They're happening simultaneously on Monday afternoon. You won't be able to get lunch unless you attend one of the sessions. We have a session which Jonathan will be part of, which is more, I will say, global expansion. It's franchise, it's finance focus, kind of all the things he knows very well. The other session we have is more technology focused, which is going to be actually a really fun one too. And then we also have a menu and supply chain one with some really incredible, the lineup of panelists from the culinary perspective is going to be great. So one not to miss, but make sure you get there early because, again, you get lunch as well.
Right. Right. Yes. And the lunch should be good. Unfortunately, it's just really too bad that the CEO versus CEO don't get into the boxing ring or play tennis.
We'll consider that for next year.
Right. Well, yeah. So, but no, we got some interesting companies. I mean, you got Dutch Bros just coming off an amazing quarter in the fourth quarter. Dave's Hot Chicken. There's been some news recently that they might be on the market, so that could make things particularly interesting. We've got Chili's just coming off an incredible year. Rob Lynch, by the way, doing some really interesting things over at Shake Shack, so that should be fascinating. So it sounds like a hell of a lineup, Emily.
I can't take all the credit because, I mean, these leaders are doing so many cool things that it just made sense to have them on stage, right? It's one not to miss this year. I would say if anyone is considering or wavering of attending or not attending, attend. It's 4 days of top insight, trends, information, networking with your peers. It's going to be a great event.
Awesome. Emily, thank you very much for joining us this week on the podcast.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Jonathan.
And that should do it for this week's episode of This Week in Restaurants, which was edited, as always, by Kimmy Spoons. Artwork by Nico Hines. You may find this and other episodes of the podcast on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify, where you should feel free to subscribe. I'm Jonathan Mays, the editor-in-chief of Restaurant Business for Joe Kiskowski and Emily Nordee-Rogers. Thank you very much for listening.